We're at the Buffalo Trace Distillery, Frankfort, Kentucky. Barbara and I did get a tour. Today is the Old Taylor tour. It was the old still back in the back, and then they have a interesting historical tour. So that's what one we're on today. We were offered the hard hat tour, but we opted for this one. So should be quite interesting. Built in 1890 and renovated in 1936, this building originally served as a boiler house for the distillery. All the steam heat used to power this distillation process, heat the warehouse, and provide comfort heat for the distillery was produced in this facility. Today, the structure serves as the site of the bottling of premium small batch bourbons and whiskeys, including Buffalo Trace straight whiskey bourbon, Kentucky bourbon whiskey, and Blanton's single barrel bourbon. Each step of the bottling process is meticulously carried out by hand, ensuring the highest quality from barrel to bottle. Again, we're going on the Old Taylor tour today, so it should be quite interesting. Pappy Van Winkle, William LaRue Weller, George T. Stagg, and Colonel E.H. Taylor.
We'll talk about our history, all right, and really zero in on a part of that history between 100 and 150 years ago. A lot going on here at the distillery in Kentucky in the United States, for that matter. We'll go in some of the oldest, most historic structures on site here, all right? The Taylor part of the Old Taylor tour, we'll talk a lot about this guy. Colonel E.H. Taylor Jr. Was only here for 15 years or so, but a real impact, a real legacy, not only on this distillery, but industry-wide. You can't tell the story of distilling in the United States without a heavy dose of Taylor, and we'll do just that. All right? Before we leave, a lot happened here before Taylor showed up. A lot has happened here since he left, and I'd like to give a real overview of our about 250-year history on this site. All right? Two brothers, Willis and Hancock Lee, are sent to explore and survey and settle this part of the country. They end up here, like what they find, decide to stop here, name the place after themselves. In 1775, the Lee brothers founded the Leestown, Virginia settlement when this was the westernmost part of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Right? First commercial distillation occurs on this site in 1786, 1 year before the Constitutional Convention. This was a distillery. We've had continual distillation here ever since. All right? That makes Buffalo Trace the oldest continually operating distillery in the United States. Tour guides will make that statement all day, every day, as if that's no big deal, but that is a big deal. For any commercial enterprise to remain active, uninterrupted on one site for 240 years or so. In the case of the distillery, two big obstacles, two big hurdles to overcome to claim that achievement. First, 1919, Prohibition rolls around, and the product we make here, intoxicating spirits, are outlawed. Right? We remain in production throughout Prohibition, one of only a handful of distilleries licensed by the federal government to produce a cure-all for whatever might ail you. Right? What is it this time? Bad back, bum knee, headache? Yeah, absolutely. Everything. Go to the doctor. He'd be more than happy to write you a prescription for 1 pint of 100 proof medicinal whiskey. Run that down to the drugstore and fill that. You can refill that prescription twice, once every 10 days. Right? For those of us where a pint every 10 days is a problem, again, I've got a couple of kids at home who get toothaches every now and then. Run them down to the dentist, get them their own prescription. Right? So that kept us in production throughout Prohibition, making that medicinal whiskey. In the case of a distillery, next big obstacle to overcome occurs in the 1980s. Right? A generational change in consumer spending patterns where demand for aged spirits collapses. Right? Everybody's drinking more beer, wine coolers were all the rage, Bartles and James, clear spirits, gin, vodka, tequila. Who in this group drank a Zima back in the day? There we go. Of course, right, of course. Great stuff, yep. Not so great. All right, but that bourbon bust of the 80s puts a lot of distilleries out of business altogether. Almost us. We get down to about 40 employees here at the entire distillery. Hang on long enough till 1992, a privately owned family business out of New Orleans, the Sazerac Company, comes in and buys the distillery. In 1999, Sazerac renames us Buffalo Trace. Here's how they chose that name. The Lee brothers, other pioneers traveling to and through Leestown, didn't have roads or highways to travel on to get here. They followed the migratory paths of the millions of Eastern American buffalo that inhabited this part of the country. Maps would refer to those paths as traces, and the trace to Leestown was known as the Great Buffalo Trace. All right, so that's how we get it. All right, we're going to see a lot of evidence of Sazerac's expansion of the distillery that began about 15 years ago when we got into this bourbon boom that we're in today. All right, so that's our 250-year journey condensed down to about 5 minutes. All right, and his time here. E.H. Taylor, born in 1830 in western Kentucky. Tough times. Probably not only in western Kentucky, but everywhere, right? Early 1800s. Taylor's father really struggled to get a footing to finance prosperity. Things really got tough for Edmund Haynes Taylor. 5 years old, his father dies, all right? Taylor's mother not sure what to do, but they had some family in New Orleans, so his mother takes Taylor down there seeking some assistance from Taylor's great uncle, a guy by the name of Zachary Taylor. All right? Well, Zachary Taylor's a little busy. He's got his hands full becoming the 12th president of the United States. Doesn't really have the time or ability to help out. Sends Taylor back to Lexington, Kentucky to live with his uncle, Edmund Haynes Taylor. This is where Taylor picks up the junior to differentiate him from his uncle, not his father. Colonel E.H. Taylor, not a military guy, he's a Kentucky colonel. All right, that's an honorary designation the governor of Kentucky can bestow on any citizen. All right, so here's Taylor, receives his formal education, begins his career in banking and finance. Right, look at him, manicured, sophisticated, only the best for Taylor. He works on putting together some financing packages for some distilleries being built. And all the while, in the back of his mind, he thinks, this isn't so hard, I could do this. Not only could I do that, I could do it better than anybody else. All right? So, Taylor takes the leap, goes to Europe for about a year, studying centuries-old European distilleries. They've been at this for a while. Comes back and buys the Leestown Distillery. All right, not that it met his needs, but it's a good location, right on the Kentucky River. We'll see here in a little bit. Good property, good water on the property. Taylor buys the distillery. His goal, his intention, to elevate the whiskey business in the United States. Tears down the distillery he bought and builds his brand new, modern, state-of-the-art distillery. One primary thing he brought back from Europe with him is the use of copper. All right, tin and nickel and iron gives a bitter taste in whiskey that copper doesn't. Copper also attracts sulfites, sulfuric compounds out of water. Taylor, being the kind of guy Taylor is, if copper's good, then a lot of copper must be great. All right, so he outfits his entire distillery, from where he sources his spring water on site, cookers, fermenters, stills, all the associated piping and plumbing. His whiskey touches nothing but copper. All right, that's important to him. He spent a lot of money to do that. We want everybody to know that, so he named his distillery Old Fire Copper. All right, he wants to conjure the image of an old European distillery, open flame cookers, copper distillation equipment. Old Fire Copper, the initials OFC, we'll see a lot of reference to those initials out there. All right, so everything's going great. He's up and running, off he goes. Lightning strikes the distillery and burns it to the ground. That might have been the end of the tour, right? Thanks for coming out. But not for Taylor, all right? He collects the insurance money, puts more of his money in there, raises money from other people, and builds an even larger, bigger, more expensive, more elaborate, embellished Old Fire Copper distillery. So, all good, right? But this is a business after all. You got to make a profit to keep things going. Taylor learns a hard lesson pretty quick. The post-Civil War consumer, no matter how good that whiskey is, can't afford to buy it. All right, so he can't sell his whiskey at a profit. Along comes this next guy, George T. Stagg, a whiskey wholesaler out of St. Louis. Make good money buying and selling whiskey. Here's about Taylor's dilemma. Comes in and saves Taylor from bankruptcy, buys the distillery. Depending which side of the story you want to take, Stagg either did Taylor a favor coming in and rescuing him, or Stagg swooped in and got the distillery for pennies on the dollar. All right? No matter how that actually went down, Stagg knew one thing: he wanted to keep Taylor around. All right? Taylor's got a great reputation as a distiller. Stagg gives Taylor a share of the distillery back to be his partner. All right? Stagg thinks he can rein him in a little bit, control his spending, while still making a good quality product that would allow Stagg to make a profit, but it didn't work. Taylor still insisted on doing things his way, right? And Stagg just didn't see eye to eye with him. In fact, these two guys shared an office on this property where they sent their office clerks in to turn their desks so they would face away from each other. Wouldn't even have to acknowledge each other's presence. Hey, you talk about holding a grudge. Come on, guys, 140 years later, they're still not living with each other. What we see out back here was built right after Prohibition by a guy named Albert Blanton. Right? Blanton was president of the distillery before, during, and after Prohibition. He secured one of those medicinal whiskey licenses, got us through Prohibition. Come on down this way. So anybody has a question, anything I say, anything you see, chime right in, be glad to answer. So, here we are, guys, 1933, Prohibition's repeal. And Blanton's a businessman, a good businessman. He recognizes that repeal of Prohibition makes it a good time to be a distillery. All right, a lot of brand new customers out there. Blanton operated the distillery during Prohibition out of 14 buildings on site here. All right, his post-Prohibition expansion of the distillery for about 12 years, 1933 to the mid-40s, he would add another 100 buildings on site here. Early on, this clubhouse built in 1935. Blanton knew one thing he needed here were a lot of people. All right, he needed builders, architects, their employees, craftsmen, skilled trade employees. And once he got up to production, he intended to have a lot of production employees here. So Blanton builds the clubhouse in 1935. Nice big space, meeting space, staging area, break room, cafeteria for all those people he anticipated having on site here. Let's walk up. Real nice, couple of good views from up here in the clubhouse. Great view from up here. A couple things to note. There's Albert Blanton right there overlooking his creek and his garden down here. Blanton lived on site here while he was president. I can't see it, but up at the top of the hill, the Stony Point Mansion, a mansion back then, just a little cottage up here now. A couple other things to note up on that tree line, that bluff. Up here behind you, you can see part of a new aging warehouse up there. We'll go in the warehouse here at the end, and I'll talk about the difference between these old and new warehouses. Blanton liked to entertain a lot. Customers, families, dignitaries, politicians, so Blanton was known to entertain a lot up here at the front. Not yet. Lower part of the campus, in 14 different warehouses, 600,000 barrels down here, over 1 million barrels up on the far. All right, so any given time, 1.6 to 1.7 million barrels aging here. So back to Taylor. E.H. Taylor shows up here in 1869. All right, but his family. His ancestors have a presence, have a legacy on this piece of property long before that. And let's make that connection. All right, to do that, we need to go back to the turn of the century. All right, not this century, not the one before it, the year 1800. All right, let's imagine ourselves standing right here on this spot in 1800 in Leestown, now part of Kentucky. All right, but the Leestown settlement, handful of buildings around here, maybe a couple of farmhouses, barns, sheds, outbuildings. There is a distillery here. By definition, might be a barn or shed with a commercial still in there, somebody making White Lightning, corn liquor for commercial sale. So a distillery nonetheless. And this building, this structure right behind us here, the stone first floor portion of that building, the oldest residential structure in Franklin County, Kentucky, built in the mid-1790s. All right? The connection to Taylor, his great-great-grandfather, Commodore Richard Taylor, would soon enough come to live in that house. All right? Richard Taylor didn't just wander by. All right, this is the wilderness, this is the frontier. He didn't just happen here, he didn't find it on Zillow, right, and decide to come live here. Richard Taylor sent here for a specific reason, and we'll talk about what that is when we get in touch. Wilderness, this is the frontier, this is the wild, wild west back then. Commodore Richard Taylor, E.H. Taylor's great-great-grandfather, sent to live and work out of this residence. You notice two front doors. There was a dividing wall down the middle here. One side would be Taylor's residence, the other side the public space that he would work out of. If Richard Taylor would stand here and gaze out this window, he wouldn't see any of these buildings here, right? What he would be looking out over is the Kentucky River, all right? Richard Taylor was sent here to design and install a series of locks and dams on the Kentucky River to develop that for transportation and commercial navigation, all right? So that's why Taylor was sent here to do that. We'll see the river here in just a minute. All right. Any questions up to this point? Has anybody been here before? Anybody been? It's everybody's first. You work here apparently, right? Yeah, all you need is a name tag. Leave him here. Leave him here. All right. She's thinking about it. She's thinking about it. That'd be a great spot. So we send some crews in to jackhammer through that concrete floor, pour some footings in there to support that loft, and they bust through that floor, all right, and they find some odd-looking debris and backfill that they weren't sure what they'd found in there. So we call in a distillery archaeologist. There's one of those. Dan, how would you feel? Send the kid to school. Dan, I'm going to be a distillery archaeologist. How proud would you be? Nick is great. He's on staff now as our historian, our archivist. Story is, we gave Nick till the end of the week to figure out what we'd run into, and we'd resume our project. Luckily for us, the more he dug, the more he found. What he ended up uncovering, the foundation of the first distillery Taylor bought here and tore to the ground. The foundation of Taylor's original OFC distillery that got struck by lightning, burned to the ground, and determined that structure, the shell of that structure, is Taylor's second OFC distillery. So let's go in there and take a look.